UK's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak called a snap general election to be held on the 4th of July. In a statement from Downing Street, Sunak said he spoke to King Charles earlier that day to request the dissolution of Parliament for a general election. Now, since he became the Prime Minister less than 2 years back, Sunak has managed to steady the economy, but he hasn't been able to boost the Conservatives' popularity with the public. Added to that is the global cost of living crisis. As he heads into the election, we are asking, can Rishi Sunak win? To discuss this, let me start by introducing my guests for the show. Joining me to discuss this are Ambassador YK Sinha, former Indian High Commissioner to the UK, Indrani Bagchi, CEO Ananta Aspen Centre, Dr. Neeraj Patil, who joins us from the UK. He's the chairman of Hindus for Labour, and of course my colleague R. Sridharan here in the News9 Plus studio. Welcome to the News9 Plus show. I want to start by asking Indrani this. Indrani, the picture of Rishi Sunak standing outside 10 Downing Street in the pouring rain reminded me of Sharad Pawar about 5 years back doing the same thing in Maharashtra when he had his back to the wall. He addressed that rally in Maharashtra, in the pouring rain. He was rewarded for it. Will this work for Rishi Sunak?
One doesn't know. The chips are almost all stacked against him and the Tories. He could have had an autumn election, which was what was planned. He went on a gamble. This is nothing short of a gamble. And I think he gambled on the fact that inflation figures came down to 2.3% yesterday morning. But the party is demoralized. The party has been losing local elections. Labour is enthused. And things haven't been going well for the Tories for some time. So one doesn't know whether this is a gamble that will pay off, or will it be the inevitable? Will it be a debate about how much will he lose by?
Is it going to be a debate about how much he'll lose by? Sri, you've been tracking Rishi Sunak very closely over the last 2 years. Tell us what he's up against. And how did a Indian origin Prime Minister, of course, that's one of the main reasons we are looking at Rishi Sunak so closely. How did he lose the plot in the last 2 years? Why is he so unpopular?
Well, I don't think it's fair to pin the blame entirely on Rishi Sunak, Sandeep, because he's been in power only for 2 years. But the fact that the Conservatives haven't had a really good handle on the Prime Minister leadership issue, within the party. And the fact that the global economic conditions weren't really good. We had inflation going up. UK was in technical recession. The second half of 2023, it's just come out of it. Interest rates were very high. Inflation was high. So I guess there are a lot of factors which also added to the, let's say, people's disaffection with the Conservative Party. So I guess these are all the reason why he's obviously chosen to call for an early election. Otherwise, it shouldn't have happened until the end of this year. Is that he sees that this is probably the best chance for Conservative to make some sort of a claim in front of people and say, okay, we can fix the problems that you've been facing. And one thing he's been consistently saying against Labour Party is that they don't have a clear plan in terms of how they want to fix the economy. So, to be fair to him, we haven't really heard much from Keir Starmer by way of the actual details. Well, there are broader points that he's come up with. I'm sure they'll be working out the details. But as of now, I think there is some case that Rishi Sunak can make, saying that they don't have a clear plan, but I have. Vote for me. But whether that actually translates into votes and whether he wins, I don't think at this point there is any indication that Rishi Sunak or the Tories are going to come back to power. All
right. Doesn't look like the Tories are coming back to power. Ambassador Sinha, you've been in the UK for many years. You've looked at the politics there very closely. How did the Conservatives so completely lose the plot? Was it a combination of the global factors, as Sri was mentioning? Is it to do with the fact that they've not had a really charismatic leader, of the kind that they had in the past? Like everyone looks towards Margaret Thatcher. What is the problem really? And what is it that Rishi Sunak is really fighting now?
I think it's a combination of factors, as the previous speakers have mentioned. But I think what is important to realize is that in the last 8 years,
Yes.
the Tories have had 4 prime ministers.
Right.
They've gone through, if I could call it, the misery of Brexit.
Yes.
On the 23rd of June 2016, they voted for Brexit.
Yes.
And on the 31st of January 2020, they were out of the EU. And that had severe economic consequences. I think people are appreciating it now. They've just emerged from shallow recession, a growth of 0.6%. And as Indrani mentioned,
Yes.
inflation 0.3%.
Right.
But that's just a drop in the water, really. Some clinging on to straws, I would think.
Right.
As far as Mr. Sunak is concerned, he's a very bright politician who
Yes.
is actually filled with a very difficult job. In
Right.
many ways, he was the fall guy
Yes.
of the Tories, because if you remember his predecessors,
Right.
particularly Liz Truss, had actually really cleared the pitch for the Tories.
Yes.
And Boris Johnson before that,
Right.
despite being a charismatic leader,
Yes.
unfortunately, especially during COVID, attracted a lot of criticism. So I think the economy in one hand, the handling of COVID to some extent,
Yes.
and of course, anti-incumbency, 14 years in power, and having changed so many captains
Yes.
midway. So I think obviously all this counts. And if you look at their record,
Yeah.
the last elections, they won 365 seats.
Yes.
And before that, a snap election by Theresa May, and actually they had reduced their majority
Right.
from 330 to 314. So I think the Labour Party itself is organized much better now under
Yes.
Starmer. Under his predecessor, of course, there was a lot of disaffection and there were problems. But I think the Labour Party has got its act together,
Right.
and they're putting a serious challenge to the Tories. So obviously, Mr. Sunak has a very tough task ahead of him.
Rishi Sunak has a tough task ahead of him, as Ambassador Sinha mentioned, and I want to come to Dr. Patil, who's joining us from the UK. Dr. Patil, I must ask you this: Ab ki baar Starmer Sarkar, is this going to be all set? Is Labour all set to take over?
Yes, so 100%. I wouldn't
Right.
even say 99%. I would say 100%. It's going to be a Labour government.
Right.
But we must, as a British Indian,
Yes.
I also celebrate the fact that we had a first black ethnic minority prime minister of
Yes.
Britain, and Rishi Sunak as a prime minister, I think he did a decent job.
Right.
And the challenge for him is, whether he will lose by a few runs or whether he loses by an innings defeat.
Right. Right.
That's the challenge.
Oh, okay. Right. I think innings defeat or a couple of runs. But Sri, this calling for early elections reminds me of the India shining moment of the NDA 20 years back,
Right.
where the NDA actually believed it was on a winning wicket and it called for early elections.
True.
And the results are known to us, and it's the Indians who are left standing in the sun for the summer elections. I think it's the first time the UK has called for such early elections. First
That's
time
true.
since 1945. But he's gone out on a limb and a prayer with that very narrow margin of the inflation figures, actually, that he hopes that will kind of get him through. But tell us about the other policies that he's really followed. If you look at him from an Indian perspective, if you were the parent of an Indian student wanting to study in the UK, Rishi Sunak wouldn't be the best, Indian origin prime minister.
True.
He tried to abolish that thing.
I mean, his stance on
Yeah.
immigration has been controversial.
Yes.
The biggest being the move to send refugees to Rwanda, to ship them
Yes.
out to Rwanda,
Right.
pay Rwanda money and get them to keep them.
Right.
But I think as far as Neeraj Patil talked about Keir Starmer.
Yes.
I mean, Keir Starmer is an interesting person. If you look at him, he was really a leftist when he began his career.
Yes.
He's a lawyer by education. People say he's methodical,
Yes.
but as lawyers go, he's also a little, not as flamboyant as, let's say, Rishi Sunak, handsome
Right.
young man, investment banker. But I think what he now brings to the table is a promise to end what he calls the Tory chaos of 14 years.
Yes.
So I think that's the promise, and that message, and
Right.
elections are all about messaging, Sandeep.
Absolutely, yes.
So I think that one line seems to be resonating with the British people.
Yeah.
And I think that itself may be enough to give, the Labour Party some sort of an edge.
Yes.
The real economic issues, whether Labour can come in and fix it,
Yes.
is like, anyone's guess, because the best forecast for the UK, economic growth is 2% in the long term.
Yes.
So it's not going to, like, any party is going to come and suddenly whip up the growth to 5-6%. That's not going to happen.
Right.
But it's a question of, can you keep inflation down?
Yes.
Can you keep interest rates down? I mean,
Right.
that's the stability which the Aam Aadmi of UK
Yes.
expects from a government.
Right.
And I think if let's say the Labour Party is able to do that,
Right.
then I think they'll be in.
Yeah, it looks like it's Labour from all accounts. But Indrani, I must ask you this. For the last 3 or 4 years, there's been talk of this India-UK trade deal, and it was almost like a QED that after Brexit, India would be the preferred trade partner for the UK. What has really held this up in the last few years? And you think that if there is a Labour government, Keir Starmer, would they push for this India-UK trade deal the way the Conservatives did in the last few years?
Probably not. And I think there has been a lot of effort,
Right.
certainly between India and the UK to complete this agreement
Right.
before the Conservatives give up power, because I think the writing has been on the wall for some
Yes.
time. It's been held up for a number of actually very few reasons, but it's not done until it's done. So I think we just have to give up on this, because with a Labour government, the emphasis will be different, the
Right.
priorities will be different. So we, in many ways, have to start from scratch, unless between now and the 4th of July,
Yes.
somehow both countries can head to the finish line.
Right. Literally, given the fact that we are in election mode as well, Sri, and that seems very unlikely.
Well, unlikely, because both
Yeah.
Rishi Sunak is clearly in the election mode, and
Yes.
and the whole country is
So
in
is
election mode already.
India in
July,
election
4th
mode.
is not far away at all. So I don't
Yes.
think it's going to happen at all.
Right. But the interesting thing here, Sri, is the choice of 4th of July. Isn't that US Independence Day
It is,
when
it is.
when the US declared independence from the UK?
Yes, yeah.
Why did they choose the 4th of July?
So one theory for that is, of course, the economic part. But the other theory
Right.
is that don't forget that US is going to election later this year. I mean,
Yes.
November we'll get to know.
Everybody is in election
Yeah.
mode this year.
So
right?
I think there is some sort of pact, between US and UK that
Yes.
both the countries should not be facing election at the same time.
Right.
So that's one of the theories
Oh,
why.
okay, that's interesting.
Because
So Atlantic cousins kind
exactly
of stagger
So
the elections.
It's not strategically advisable
Right.
for the two countries to be caught up with their own internal issues at
And
the same time.
Not to mention
Yeah,
Russia.
and when there's so much happening,
Russia on their doorstep.
Russia, plus there's so
Right,
much happening
and
in the
China.
Middle East.
Yes.
So I think there was some sort of maybe that also played a role.
Right.
Although I would err on the side of like the economic, the upswing which. A mild upswing which Britain is witnessing.
Yes.
On the
Inflation
growth.
is down.
Yeah,
and
exactly. I
2%.
think from a political point of view, I think that probably was a bigger a driver
Right.
of the decision to go for a snap election
Yes.
July 4th.
4th of
but
July,
that
yes.
could have also been a factor.
That's right. Interesting point of view there. But ambassadors, now, what do we know about Labour? I mean, Indrani just kind of pricked the balloon there when she said there's not going to be an India-UK trade deal. What do we know about Labour's attitude towards India, and what can we expect from Keir Starmer? How have you've seen him closely? What's your assessment of him, Keir Starmer prime ministership?
Before I answer your question, may I just address 2 points quickly? One,
Absolutely.
Immigration issue. I think what we must, as Indians,
Yes.
Indian students, parents of Indian students and Indian students themselves, be very mindful of is the attempt to scrap the 2-year post-study visa.
Yes.
That, in my opinion, a retrograde step.
Right.
Because the UK would be losing a lot of money. They earn about over 25 billion pounds
Yes.
from international students. And Indians are going to be the most affected.
Right.
I hope policy doesn't go through. And the second point on the India-UK trade deal.
Yes.
While the Conservatives really pushed it, I think the Labour Party will not abandon it simply because it will be good for them. Because if a trade deal that is a mutually win-win situation, and I hope that's what happens,
Right.
then it boosts UK exports into
Yes.
India, which are actually lagging behind because we have a favourable balance of trade.
Right.
But having said that, of course, till the last screws turn until the last sort of I is dotted. We really won't know whether we will have a trade deal before 4th of July. And if we don't, then hopefully we might have a good deal after.
Right.
But as far as the Labour attitude and the question that you asked, I think the Labour attitude towards India has been actually it's very surprising. It's not very surprising because constituency pressure. We know what constituency pressure has. Labour has been taking a very, I would say, even an anti-India stand on issues of more importance to us in the past.
Yes.
And remember, I go hard back to Robin Cook, where Queen Elizabeth was, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth was coming to India. They stayed on Kashmir, really, where you had David Miliband talking in the similar vein. And then Jeremy Corbyn, he in fact was influenced by a large number of people from Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, Mirpur in particular, and Pakistan, and their positions, their resolutions, not favorably inclined towards India on one hand. And then you had members of parliament who were hardline Sikhs, who were espousing, if not espousing, at least sympathetic to the separatist cause. So I think we would need to be very careful. I think Sir Keir Starmer is obviously done a very good swing back to a position which we would be more comfortable with. But I think time will tell when Labour is in power, because don't forget that there is a certain area in the Midlands and Birmingham, Manchester, etc., which actually, I don't have the exact figure in my time, there were 11 members of parliament representing that constituency I referred to, and calling or influencing Labour Party opinions and views on the subcontinent. So I think we will have to be careful, very watchful, and see how things emerge. I do hope that we will have a very productive relationship, and people like Judge will help us in achieving that.
Right. I'm going to ask that question to Dr. Patil. Since you're a member of the Labour Party, Dr. Patil, what can India expect from a Labour government, a Keir Starmer government? As Ambassador Sinha was saying, Labour has not been too friendly in the past.
See, let me clarify. It's a two-way process. So the thing is, I chair Hindus for Labour, and why Labour Party started as Hindus for Labour was in 2019, during the tenure of Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour Party policy shifted, was anti-India, and so then a motion was passed at the Labour Party conference that led to a lot of Hindus quitting the Labour Party. Now, the current Labour administration want Hindus and Muslims together in the Labour Party. So, and Labour Party wants good bilateral relations between India and Pakistan. And that's the key thing. So, I hope the Indian administration that takes takes power on 5th of June emphasizes that the good emphasizes on good bilateral relations between India and Pakistan. Not only that, also good relations between various religious communities in India as well. It is very, very important.
Absolutely. Peace and harmony. But thanks for your observations, Dr. Patil. But Sri, you have a point there.
So, one thing we should remember is that while Keir Starmer did, earn his spurs under Jeremy Corbyn, the fact that he moved the party away from ultra-left to more towards the centre. Now, that's something which, even some people in the Labour Party are not happy with. They think that he's abandoning our, ultra-left stance. But I think we can expect a very pragmatic, approach from Keir Starmer, because ultimately he's a lawyer. He's going to be fairly balanced in terms of approach, and that's already, in many occasions he's already displayed that. And to Dr. Patil's point, he even went and inaugurated the statue of Lord Basaveshwara, a renowned sage from Karnataka, which, even our Prime Minister went and unveiled it at Dr. Patil's invitation. So I think he will display a lot of pragmatism, and India is now at a point where, it's a counterbalance to a lot, China.
That's right.
So, in terms of India being an economic sweet spot, and being strategically important for the Western world, I don't think Keir Starmer is going to forget that.
Yes.
So that will pretty much be, the center point of their engagement with India.
The Five Eyes strategy.
Absolutely. So I think he will adopt a very pragmatic approach.
He'll be a pragmatic Prime Minister. And but going back to Rishi Sunak, who's literally fighting with his back to the wall, what do you think his mother-in-law would advise him, given the fact that she's also in Parliament now, in the Rajya Sabha? Sudha Murthy.
Well, I wish I could read Sudha Murthy's mind, but I know that Mrs. Murthy is a very, very smart, accomplished woman. And I guess she'll probably just advise him, take the public's decision with grace, whatever it is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the, ethos of a democracy.
Absolutely. And he'll live on to fight another day because he's really young and he's a long way to go. But thank you very much for that great discussion. Indrani Bagchi, Ambassador Sinha, Dr. Patil and my colleague Sridhar Ramakrishnan. Rishi Sunak, can he win? We'll know in July.